What is going on, Alphas? Welcome back to the Alpha Male Podcast. A fun episode today. If you've listened to the last few podcasts in order, we've done some pretty deep philosophical discussions, and those are great. I thought it'd be fun to step back and do a fun but practical topic we haven't done in a while. We've done other shows on knives, but just a show on blades for different things. We're going to do one today from mild to wild. Guns for the gentleman and the business casual attire, all the way to blades of the apocalypse. With everything going on, I think it's fun sometimes to just step back and beneficial for us men to get together in our virtual tribe and to talk about something that I think most men like and are attracted to, knives. Blades. So we're going to do that today. Before we do, though, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, scroll down, hit some stars, or a review would be nice. If you want to be a tighter knit part of the tribe, if you like this tribe, if you like this podcast, and you want to be closer in contact with some awesome like-minded men, consider becoming a patron. You can get there via goodshepherdtraining.com, or I'll just put a link to Patreon in the show notes. But more so, I'd like you to become a patron, a supporter of the podcast, because you believe in the message, because you think this is content that should be out there to men. If you think this or the other podcasts help make men better, stronger men, that's a mark of an alpha male. They help other men be stronger. And if you want to help other men be stronger, you can support the podcast by becoming a patron. All right, with that, I'll plug in the bio. And this is not the bio you've heard over and over again. This is going to premiere a brand new bio recording that I'm going to put in for this. It's going to premiere on this episode. So stay tuned. I'll plug that in, and then we'll get into the topic for today. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ. A simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. All right, what you've been waiting for. Blades for the apocalypse. And if there's one thing we can count on Hollywood, it's realistic expectations of what we need for the apocalypse. So your one blade you probably should have is a katana. I mean, come on. The katana can do it all. It slices, it dices, it's stabby, it's pokey. You could even use it to make french fries and onion rings. You're going to be doing a lot of manual labor in the apocalypse. You're going to get hungry. It's fast handling. It looks cool. It is the Ginsu knife of the apocalypse. Obviously a ridiculous choice for the apocalypse, but I thought it'd be fun. Now let's get into some actual practical blades to have in hard times and emergency situations. The number one utilitarian tool for that, I think, is going to be the multi-tool. Multi-tools are fantastic. They get used a lot. I don't EDC one all the time, but I have one in my baby bugout bag, which we've talked about before. That's usually within sprinting distance of me. I have at least one in there. I also have gotten to where I keep one pretty handy in the center console of my vehicle because it just gets used so much. It's so handy. And unless you're in true pristine wilderness, it would still be handy there, but in any kind of semi-urban, suburban environment, you're probably going to use a multi-tool, whether in regular times or, Mad Max times, more than anything else. It's not the best fighting implement, I'll grant you that, but it's certainly better than just your fists. But, a good pair of pliers comes in handy a lot. Maybe you're trying to make an aluminum can or a old metal soup can into a stove to cook dinner. We often gravitate towards the tactical stuff all the time, but practical stuff is probably more important. Hopefully in the apocalypse, even then, hopefully you're going to have to eat more than you have to get in hand-to-hand combat. A good multi-tool, a good file on a multi-tool, that comes in handy so much for me. A good pair of pliers, a good pair of wire cutters. The combination of having a good file and a good saw, like a wood saw, is fantastic. And they're hard to find, but if you can find one with a metal saw as well, good for a lot of things. I mean, being able to cut through even small metal is fantastic. Just think about the applications of that in regular times or in really hard times. Being able to cut through a lock, being able to cut out of a padlock, or being able to cut a pair of handcuffs or cut wire. A good multi-tool. And there are a lot of good ones. I really, really like the Gerber I was issued a Gerber in Iraq in the Marine Corps, and I had that thing for I don't know how long. I don't have it anymore, but I had that thing for years and years and years, and it was always good and it always worked. Leatherman is obviously the quintessential, kind of known for pioneering this, and they still make some of the best. The one that I have now in my baby bugout bag is a Leatherman Leap. I really like it. Also, a good small one for on a budget are the ones they sell at Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop, which I guess are the same thing now, but they have their own kind of small multi-tool. And they're fantastic. They're like, I don't know what they are now with inflation, but last time I bought one, they were like $5 or $6. And I still have one. My wife has one. It gets used a lot. They are very compact. I don't EDC one, but you could if you wanted to. The reason I don't EDC one day to day is the next category I'm going to talk about. And this is kind of like the European version of our multi-tool, I see it as. And that's a Swiss Army knife. I mean, Swiss is in the name, but obviously, as Americans, we use these a lot, and they come in all manner of sizes. I have one of these in my big bug-out bag, one of the giant Victorinox with, like, literally magnifying glass and all kinds of stuff on it. And it's in a bug-out bag for a reason. If things get really bad, having a lot of tools at my disposal gives me a lot more options. And what I EDC is, I think it's called the Victorinox Classic. It's the very small, just minimal little Swiss Army knife. And that's not my only EDC knife. That's like my secondary EDC blade. I have my big one, my fixed blade that I EDC. My everyday carry knife is a fixed blade, almost always, unless I go some crazy place where it's not legal. But I pretty much carry a fixed blade most of the time. But in my pocket, I have one of these Victorinox Classics attached to a mini Sharpie, which also gets used a lot. But it's just got a very simple small blade on it, which I use for opening packages, cutting tape, the common things that we use them for, pre-event, so I can keep my EDC blade, my actual fixed blade, sharp and ready. Because let's be honest, I like most of you out there probably are in the same category. I don't come home and sharpen my knife every day to make sure it's razor sharp for the next day. That's what that little Victorinox is for. I use it a lot. It cuts a lot of stuff. If it's fairly dull, I don't really care because I have another sharp knife on me. That's my go-to knife if I need something in an emergency. Cut somebody out of a burning car, who knows what. I'm not doing that with the Victorinox. That's, again, for the everyday tasks. That little one also has a pair of tweezers on it. Good for pulling cactus spurs out of yourself. Also has a little screwdriver head, which I've used quite a bit. It also has a small file on there. So a lot of utility, and they're very, very small. You might want to go a little bit larger, a little bit bigger. And not just those. There are some multi-bladed knives. You think of the old classic case and things. I remember my father carrying one of those in his pocket. Just a classic. It's got like a big blade and a smaller blade. They make a lot of iterations of that where you just get one big blade and then maybe a sheep's foot blade on the other side. Or you have a regular blade and a serrated or a saw blade. There's a lot of utility there. Now moving on from there, let's talk about some bigger blades. Now I joked in the beginning about a katana. I think that's a horrible choice. And like in my vehicle, which I consider it's my only vehicle. It's my bug out vehicle. I don't count my wife's car. It's my daily driver, my bug out vehicle, all that. In there I carry what most will call like a fireman's axe. Great thing to have if you need it for a lot of things. But for this, I'm really going to stick to like something you would actually carry on your person. The katana, obviously ridiculous. But a good choice. Not a horrible choice, a machete. Machetes come in handy for a lot of things. A machete is a very utilitarian blade. I wouldn't want it as my only blade, but I would certainly want it over no blade. But like a big, I wouldn't even say big, like a medium-sized machete and one of the multi-tools we talked about earlier, that'd be a pretty good combo. Something a lot of people don't think about that are very utilitarian, a good improvised weapon good for a lot of tasks, harvesting a lot of food that you don't think about, are small shovels. This could be anything from a small gardening shovel that you've sharpened to the e-tool that the Marines have and use. I guess all the armed forces, but I really think the Marines pride themselves in being able to fight with an e-tool. That stands for entrenching tool, if you don't know, for making like fighting positions. It's basically a small foldable shovel. I got to admit, though, I think the Russians have it best on here. I have one of the, whatever they call it, Spetsnaz shovels. I think that's a simpler, better design. I think it's great. I believe it's a little bit lighter. Again, simpler. It doesn't fold or anything. It's just a small, handy shovel with a wicked blade on it. And they're great for a lot of things. I've used it quite a bit. I use it for all kinds of tasks. I used it yesterday. I'm living off grid, if you guys don't know, and I used it to do some hydraulic engineering because there was a little pool around where I'm camping that there's a ton of mosquitoes around. So I used it to do some I guess you would call it hydraulic engineering, and move that water somewhere else. I've used it to harvest food. I've used it to do all manner of things. That little shovel is super handy. And it would be a very wicked weapon. The other classic kind of survival apocalyptic thing you kind of think of as a hatchet. Now, I don't think you're going to carry a full-size axe around, maybe because that was the only thing you had. You had no guns, you had nothing else. Maybe a full-size axe. Maybe some kind of like bearded axe or something like that. But a small axe, hatchet, anywhere in that medium to small size range, they're great for a lot of things. You could build an entire house out of one. Plenty of, pioneers and stuff had basically their Hudson Bay or whatever style axe and built a house out of it. I don't think that's a likely scenario, but that shows you the utility of it. They're good for lots of things. I do really like the ones with the pick on the other side, not so much for a weapon. It obviously could be used for that, but for digging. If you don't have, you're probably not carrying around a shovel and a hatchet and a knife and a gun and a bunch of other stuff. It's just too heavy. So if you're picking one bigger implement and it's going to be a hatchet, I like the back with that pick on there for digging, because you don't want to ruin your blade. You can dig with the front end of the axe or the hatchet, but it's a pain in the butt. And you make it dull. So if you have a pick on the other end for digging, for harvesting food that's in the ground, a lot of high calorie dense foods are tubers. If you're into foraging and stuff like that, which I am, a lot of the calorie dense foods are roots. And to get those, you have to dig. And going back to that multi-tool, if you do have a file on your multi-tool or Swiss Army knife, then you can actually keep that blade sharp. I guess this would fit into blades, but a decent small saw would be good. And the little, whatever they call them, ranger saws, but it's basically, they're made all manner of ways. They make even like the chainsaw blades with the handles. I would probably stick more towards the ones that are just a piece of wire that you hold in your hand and pull back and forth that can be used as a saw. And you can cut wood with, obviously, an axe, with a knife. You can baton stuff and all that other stuff, but a little tiny saw, whether on your Swiss Army knife or a hand pull saw with a cord, those are really handy for getting nice clean lines, which are good if you're trying to make traps. Let's say you're building a fish spear or a fish trap or something like that. Good clean lines are a lot easier than trying to smash it clean with a hatchet if you've ever done work like that. Next, we're going to talk about what you think of as at least what I think of as like your quintessential survival blade, man. Your fixed blade. Decent sized fixed blade knife. If it's good enough for Rambo, it's probably good enough for you. Now, that's kind of a running joke, like in the survival community. Like, Rambo does everything with a knife. It's everything. He takes on like the whatever army with a knife. But there is a reason that a knife, a good quality, decent sized knives, have been a standard in pretty much every culture. Whether it's Native American, whether it's the Scandinavian Vikings or the Roman dagger. I can't think of any culture where their societies didn't value their own whatever version of this knife is. The Scandinavians call it a puko. The Romans called it a puglio. In English we just call it a knife. In the Marine Corps today, it's a K-bar. But that shows you the value and utility of a knife like this. They're great for a lot of things. A good, decent size. And when I say decent size, I don't mean it has to be giant like an actual Marine Corps K-bar, which is a great knife. But I think anywhere in a 3-inch to a 5-inch blade is probably my Goldilocks zone. I know a K-bar I think has a 7-inch blade. But I think a 3 to 5-inch blade, if you look at most primitive cultures and most cultures, a knife of that size, it's big enough for pretty much anything, and it's not so big as to be ridiculous. I was issued a K-bar. I carried a K-bar. My day-to-day, even EDC in Iraq, when I was a professional warfighter, I had a small 3-inch fixed blade knife that I kept on my kit, kept on my body armor. It's just a better, more balanced size. And even me, knowing almost nothing enlisting as a 17-year-old going into the Marine Corps, I settled on something like that. That good 3 to 5-inch range fixed blade, and there's a ton of them. There's so many good ones. There's whole knife forums and stuff, and they get in arguments about which one's better. But any good one. Gerber makes some really good, affordable 4 to 5-inch fixed blades. Buck has their classic, a ton of knives in this range. If you want to go American made. K-bar is kind of what Marines refer to as their issued K-bar, but K-bar is a knife company and they make knives that are a little bit smaller than the Marine Corps issued K-bar in this range. Condor is kind of known for this. Cold Steel makes some really good ones. There's a bunch. Say for all around utility, get what you like, but a good classic clip point or drop point blade has a lot of utility. Nothing wrong with a Tonto blade. I like those too. But if you're talking pure wide range of functions from skinning a deer to using it as a last ditch self-defense weapon, the clip point, drop point blades are great. SE is kind of known for their fixed blade survival knives. Ontario Rats. All of these are great. And I'm saying I don't care which one you pick. Any good quality fixed blade knife, it's more important that you know how to use a knife, handle a knife, sharpen a knife, do simple common tasks with the knife. That's more important than whether you get the SE versus the Condor, or whether it's 1095 or 440C. The fact that you know how to use it and maintain it is more important. So pick one, a good, solid, fixed blade knife in the 3+ inches. I think 3 would really be my minimum. 4 to 5 inches at that 4-inch range, 5-inch range is really good. You can go bigger than that if you want, especially if it's going to be your one blade. You're going to Rambo it and just go into the apocalypse with your one knife. A great choice for this is the Glock knife. I can't believe I didn't mention that. The Glock knife, it's very affordable. It's like $30 or $40 I'm living off grid, so I don't know what inflation is right now, but generally they're $20-something to $30-something. And they're affordable. They make a straight back version and a saw back version. If I was going to get one for all around, obviously get the saw blade on the back. Why wouldn't you? Now, it's not going to be a Husqvarna chainsaw, but it'll get the job done, I'm sure. Much better than trying to improvise something. I really do like the Glock knife. They are really good value, and they have a thin, small blade, which I'm sure is still plenty strong, but it's light. It's a light knife. I really, really like that knife. In fact, on my go-to, what you would call it, bug-out gun, apocalypse gun, if I had to boil it down to just one, I'd really have to be between two, but on one of my go-to grab-and-go scabbards, 12-gauge shotgun, I have a Glock knife attached to it with the saw back blade. They're a great fixed blade knife. And again, they're affordable. Now, there's a reason classic cultures had these. And folding knives go back a long way in history if you look at folding knives, but for a long time they were a novelty or for the super wealthy. But common, good, locking, folding knives, let's say the last 100 years, they've become pretty common and pretty prevalent. So, everything we talked about, the utility of a good fixed blade knife, if you want something that you're going to carry day to day, Again, I carry a fixed blade knife, but most people are going to carry a folding knife. And again, I don't care which one you get. The Cold Steel Recon is a good one. My favorite that I always recommend for just about anybody getting into EDC, beginning, intermediate, whatever, the Buck 110 Slim is fantastic. My nephew just reached out to me, said his little brother wants to get into Boy Scouts and get a knife. He asked my recommendation. Without hesitation, I said, Buck 110. The Buck 110 is it. If you want the more classic one to hand down or something like that, more classic look, just a regular Buck 110. But the 110 Slim, it's just basic, affordable version, is very affordable, and they go all the way up to, a lot, 2 or 3 times more expensive depending on blade steels and finishes and whatnot. Just even the basic one, the Buck 110 Slim, is good, fantastic, great size. I used one to carry one when I was a professional hunter. It shows you how good it is and how utilitarian it is. And not the fancy one, just the basic one, and it did everything I needed it to. For years and years, my go-to EDC was a Gerber 06 Auto. Now it's an auto knife. They're great. It's robust. It even locks. You can lock it open, so it basically becomes fixed blade at that point. But they are super robust. I would never worry about one of those folding or anything like that on my fingers. But the Gerber 06 Auto, as the name implies, is an auto, and as an auto, it's a felony in a lot of places. So that might disqualify it for a lot of you who live in those places, or a lot of you who travel to or through those places. So for that reason, it may not be for everybody. But the Buck 110 Slim is fantastic. They also make the 112, and I think there are some places where over a 3-inch blade, which is ridiculous, is against the law to carry. So they make the 112, which is a little bit smaller, but still a great utilitarian folding knife. No, I said in the beginning we'd talk about this. We've talked about thus far post-event. But what about pre-event? What about pre-crunch? Let's say that you are every day, day-to-day, you wear a business casual. And I have been in the corporate management world. I have done that job. I don't generally talk about that in the bio, but I've had a job where I had to wear suits, like 3-piece suits. Now, I still carried a gun, even a full-size gun, but most people in that environment are going to be EDCing a pocket knife. What about the classy gentleman's knife, the classy EDC? So let's talk pre-event in that world. You work every day, day-to-day sales. Maybe you wear a polo and slacks. Maybe you have to wear a suit and a tie, which is miserable. I'm so glad to be out of that world. Especially the tie. What a horrible invention. But let's talk about knives for those people. Your crossover here. Again, your Buck 110 Slim. They come in a variety of colors. Just your classic black. You're the kind of guy that wears a suit day to day, or wears, business casual or a polo day to day, but you also go out and hunt and fish. That Buck 110 is like the size and the shape and the blade configuration for that. I would have no problem wearing that in business casual in the black color. That blends in very well, or that whatever it is, micarta handle that looks really classy. And I would have no problem the next day going out into the woods with that and butchering a deer. It would do both. I think that Buck 110 Slim is the crossover, and it's very affordable. Another notable mention, if you're mostly doing utilitarian urban stuff and you're doing utility work, business casual, cutting up boxes, things like that, the Cold Steel Tough Light. They have a Tough Light and a Mini Tough Light. Both are great. Both are fantastic. Both really punch above their weight class as far as the amount of utility you get for the money and just the amount of work you can do with such a small knife. Neither one of those are big, but they do a lot of work, and they do a lot of things well, and they are just great at cutting. If you're making that big city money, buying your big city coffees, and you got money to spend, I would say a great and good looking knife and really stepping up in the blade steel and all that is going to be your Benchmade Now, I only own one Benchmade, and I got it when I was in that world, that big city money world. And it is a good knife. I kind of use it for my ultralight EDC when I'm running and doing wind sprints and things like that. I'm running with it yesterday out in the wilderness, and that is going to be the Benchmade Bailout. It's a small, thin, very good looking, sleek Tanto blade. So if you got mad at me for joking about the katana being ridiculous in the beginning, you can get your little baby mini Tanto here. It's got a Tanto blade for an urban environment, but it's not so big and ridiculous as that somebody would really, well, people get offended at everything, but most people would not get offended if you just pulled it out in a business environment to cut something in a board meeting. It's a great tool. It's great for day-to-day tasks. And I got it when I was in this world because it's about the smallest size that I would feel comfortable if I was going to use it in a defensive situation, as like I was fighting on the ground and couldn't get to my gun and I had to pull this out, I'd be fine. Like that knife would do everything I needed it to. And again, that's the Benchmade Bailout. I don't own one, but another couple of good choices for this. The Benchmade Bugout is a good all-around knife. Again, I don't own one, but it's very similar to the Bailout, except it has the more traditional blade style. And then the Osborne is kind of a unique-looking blade style. I don't own one. I can't endorse it firsthand, but it looks like it will be a good knife, and it's kind of classy looking, and it's been around a while, so it's probably a good knife. So those for gentlemen carry. And then from that, we'll transition to the more classic. Now, I don't like these as much, but they're kind of your classic, and that is your case or case style. Case are the ones I think of when I think about this. Case or old timer. Just your traditional folding pocket knife without a clip to clip into your pocket, so nobody's going to see it if it's in your pocket. The big issue I have with them is they don't lock, and I've had those fold over on my finger before, and I've had to get stitches. Yet granted, my fault, but I would just assume a knife is going to lock back. But these are your classic, what you think of as your classic grandpa's pocket knife. And especially if you get like the antlered ones or the bone ones with the little thing you can engrave your name on or your initials on. They're just your classic quintessential kind of gentleman's knife. Check out the Sod Buster if you're looking for one like that. They're just a good day-to-day, classy carry knife. Maybe you're, a gentleman, but in a more rural country environment. Again, nobody's going to bat an eye at those kind of knives. Pretty much everybody have one. I shouldn't say everybody, but the vast majority of people remember their father or grandfather having a knife like this all the time for good reason. It's a great utilitarian knife. I remember them from my childhood. Now, there are a ton of knives out there. I'm not a knife snob. I'm not a knife connoisseur. I do a whole other podcast called Gunfighter Life. I don't do one called Knife Fighter Life. As you probably know from my background, I have some knife fighting experience. Some, obviously, knife experience in practical use. For my bio, obviously, as a professional hunter and guide, part of that was butchering for clients and things like that. I have, done all manner of knife work on anything from a white-tailed deer to a buffalo to an elk. There are a ton of knives out there. I even like watching, sometimes there's a YouTube channel, Knife Center. I think he even did one called Gentleman Knives. I didn't want to watch that again. It's been a long time. I didn't want to eat off somebody else's plate. There's a lot of probably other really good gentleman knives out there and a lot of other really good apocalypse knives out there. One of mine that I keep in the Hummer along with that axe is a kukri. Kukris are great. They're kind of a mix between a utilitarian tool, a machete, and a fighting implement. It's very handy, and I've used it for food harvesting. I've used it for things like that. It is very good and utilitarian. It would be a nasty, nasty weapon. No, I'm probably not going to carry that either pre-event or post-event because unless I'm, let's say, going out to harvest agave, it's just a lot of extra weight. Unless my job that day is to go out and hike out a road in the Oregon rainforest where I am now, probably not carrying that because I have a gun. I carry a gun day to day, so it would be a bad situation where I was using that as a weapon. Really bad. But kukris are a great blade for a lot of things. One of my favorite go-to blades is the Tom Brown tracker style blade. It looks kind of crazy. It looks like some kind of weird alien knife, but it's a great design. The mini version of that is one of my go-to EDC knives, my go-to everyday carry knives. They are fantastic. If you look them up and see what they look like, they're kind of crazy looking, but they are very utilitarian. The swept back blade, that undercut is great for a lot of different tasks. The saw blade on the back is fantastic. If you look at it, you just look at it and know that it would make a fantastic weapon. Probably not for your gentleman carry, even if you deep carry it in your pocket, the second you pull it out, even though the mini one is not huge, you're probably going to get some eye rolls if you pull that thing out. But a lot of knives we didn't talk about today is the point of that little sidebar there. Again, if you want to be part of, the after show chat, become a patron. Join on Patreon. We have an insider chat on there, and we talk about stuff like this all the time. Not just me, it's us helping each other. There's a lot of men on there that know a lot more about stuff than I do. If you want to be part of that, become a patron. If you want to support the podcast, become a patron. Or if you want to contact me to help in another way or support in another way, you can do that via goodshepherdtraining.com. I'll put both a link to that and patron in the show notes. Oh, honorable mention on this real quick. The Spyderco. That's a good gentlemanly kind of knife. The, Spyderco, Para, those ones. I'm not a Spyderco fan. I just think the blades look hideous on almost all their knives. The vast majority of them. I just don't like that shape, that style. To me, I think they're ugly. But a lot of people really like them. It's just kind of like the Glock thing. Like, some people think they're good looking. Some people think they're butt ugly. I don't really care for the Spydercos, but they're good knives. A classic like Para would be a good EDC gentleman's carry knife. I believe they make one called the Delica, which would be fantastic for like the gentleman EDC carry. But I don't have anything against Spyderco. I'm sure they work fine. I don't own any. Again, just because there's so many options and I don't really like the way they look. But with that, I'm going to transition into the tactical tip of the day. One thing that a lot of survival knives have, we talked about the fixed blades, a lot of the ones marketed as like for survival, they come with a ferrocerium rod. But a lot of knives don't. A ferrocerium rod is super handy, whether they get wet, whether you have to swim across a river, whether it's raining and everything's wet. And I said that I'm in a rainforest currently. You can get a spark. Getting a fire going is a whole other problem when everything's wet, but you can at least get a spark with a ferrocerium rod. If you don't know, a ferrocerium rod, just referred to as a ferro rod, is some kind of metallurgy mixture that when hit with something hard creates a decent sized spark. But you don't have to have this to come with your knife. There are a couple of ways, and my go-to EDC knives have these attached. One of the easiest ways to attach these to a knife doesn't have one. Hopefully you listened to our manly skills episode, but one of the skills you should have as a man is knot tying. So make yourself a good lanyard on the backside of your knife or on your sheath. Most knives or sheaths will have a way to attach a lanyard. One, it'll give you some extra cordage. Two, this is a way to attach your ferrocerium rod. Look on eBay, probably Amazon too. They'll have the ferrocerium rods that are cut with little holes in them to be used like toggles. You can use these on a jacket or something like that. And again, they're a ferrocerium rod to start a fire. They're great. You can get these and attach them to the lanyard on your knife. Now, if you want to be super tactical apocalypse ready for the zombie chipmunks that may come, you take your lanyard, you get your little ferrocerium rod toggle on there so you can always start a fire. Or at least always make a spark. Making a fire is a skill. But you can make that spark, and they make what's called fire cord. It's 550 cord with a fire starter as one of the strands inside there. So not only do you have your knife and your fire starter, you have tinder on your knife. If you want to be super, ultra, mega tactical, I mean so tactical that Soldier of Fortune magazines writes articles about you. They make the Survival 550 cord. It has a fire starter in it and fishing string. You can attach that to your knife, and you can get a small fish hook or two. Attach that into your sheath, whether it's just sticking it into the leather or squeezing it in between the fold-over Kydex sheath or behind your ulti clip, which is what I do. You have all that fire stuff start we talked about, and you have a way to catch fish. And it weighs so little. It weighs, fractions of an ounce to have a good small fish hook on there. So that is your tactical tip of the day. Side note, if you carry a little folder, don't want to do the toggle thing, make smaller ferrocerium rods that work not great, and you can usually slip those inside the folding part of the knife. Alright, with that, men, the important part of the episode, the tactical verse of the day. Because no matter how long you survive, one day we'll stand before the judgment seat. Today's reading is from Psalm 51. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only, have I sinned. In this crazy modern world, it's easy to lose sight of what's really important. What's most important is God. Don't lose sight of Him. Don't push Him aside from the center of your life for all the shiny things, the trinkets of Babylon. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Thanks, men. Have a blessed day.